Right, whenever you're ready.
Hi, my name is Josh Reneker. How many of you guys eat? Basically everyone, right? So the reason I ask this is because we're eating oil, because petrochemicals are used in food additives and colorings. So since oil is like an everyday use, whether it's gassing up your car or you just eating, my main claim of fact is that oil drilling restrictions negatively impact the United States economy. The three ways I support this is by talking about the oil drilling restrictions that affect the jobs right now, and also another way I prove this is through the effects in the ability to reach the demand of oil that we have, and also the effects on the prices of consumer goods since it's used in everyday things. First, the oil drilling restrictions. One of the restrictions we have is on fracking, which fracking is using liquid to break rocks into the ground in order to extract oil from the ground and be able to use that for our goods, or commonly gasoline. But just earlier this year in March, the Obama administration put a restriction on fracking on public lands. And that does not allow us to produce more oil, and it also affects the jobs. It was found by the IHS Global Insight that fracking would produce 1.7 million jobs, whether it just be in the fracking industry, but also other industries that are involved in fracking, like mechanical companies that would produce the equipment to be able to make these, to make fracking useful. Also, another restriction that was put into place was offshore drilling in the eastern Gulf of Mexico. This restriction is until 2022, and we were already currently drilling in the eastern Gulf of Mexico. But since the restriction was created, we had a job loss because we had to close down any drilling within the eastern Gulf of Mexico. It also has an impact on future jobs because now we cannot expand our drilling into the eastern Gulf. The second secondary claim is the ability to meet demand. Because of the restrictions, we obviously can't reach our demand and supply enough oil. One way this directly affects it is the cost per barrel, which directly affects our gasoline prices, as many of you know. According to the Energy Information Administration, also known as the EIA, they had graphs that show a direct relationship between the cost per barrel and the cost of gasoline prices. So as the price per barrel goes up, so does our gasoline prices, which then hurts our pockets, and we cannot use our money towards other ways in the economy like we want to. So in order to reach our demand, we have to obviously go into imports. The EIA also found that we import about 9 million barrels per day. And that's about 46% of the oil in U.S. refineries. So almost 50% of our oil comes from other countries. The EIA also found in a monthly report that was just released this month, October 2015, a difference of $10 to $20 was found between domestic and imports from overseas. With that $10 and you multiply it to our 9 million a day, that's $90 million in additional cost because we're importing the oil instead of doing domestic. If we did domestic, we'd be saving about 90 million a day. So the U.S. current drilling needs to be maintained in order to keep up with at least some of the demand that we have, and also we need to expand it. Since the EIA also found that 19.1 million barrels a day are used in the U.S., so with the 19.1 and taking out the imports, we are only producing about 10 million per day. And the EIA forecast just this year alone that we have 0.2 million barrels more per day going out. So that means our demand is increasing, and since our restrictions are in place, we cannot continue to drill and keep up with the demand. So that's why we're heavily reliant upon the imports from overseas. The last claim is the fact that the restrictions affect the goods that we consume. Some of you guys may know that a lot of our products are oil-based, such as our plastics, detergents, lubricants, candles, and medications, and even vitamins. So if you use any of those things, you're indirectly using oil because it uses either a chemical, like petrochemicals, which are chemicals that come from petroleum, which is also given by oil. The other way it affects the price of goods is the transportation of our goods. So since we have to transport our goods via usually big rig or by the trains or the ships, we're having to use oil to get the goods there. And according to Dr. Rowe and Dr. Notiboom from Hofstra University, they found that about 10% of a product's cost comes from the transportation of the product. And if prices are higher with the oil, obviously it's going to affect our pockets and the fact that we are going to have to pay more for our consumer goods. So in the end, my conclusion is that we need to be able to have less restrictions in order to improve our economy and also keep the prices of our goods down. And so that way the economy can continue to flourish.
All right, Josh, the proposition is very clearly identified. There is a preview of the supporting material. One problem with the preview is the secondary claims, both in the preview and in the structure of the speech, aren't really phrased like declarative sentences. They're mostly topic areas or ideas. Now, I think most of us are going to be able to make the inference about what it is you're saying on those individual points, but we shouldn't be dependent on the audience making the inferences there. You want to make them very clear from your point of view. So it's not that complicated. You've got the right idea. You're right there. You just need to make them into declarative statements. You know that the restrictions are limiting the amount of oil that's available. The restrictions are increasing the price of products that we're paying. Simple declaratives, and that would, I think, fix that problem. That's the main issue in the argument. Otherwise, I thought you did a pretty good job. It's well organized. You did a pretty solid job citing your sources consistently. There's a little bit of confusion about some of the statistical information you had on the amount that's produced versus the amount that's imported versus the amount that's used. But it wasn't so difficult that we couldn't at least get the gist of what you were talking about, even if we don't always get the exact points that you're mentioning. And like I said, there was usually a source citation for most of that information. There were a couple of places where there's an assertion, and I don't doubt what you're saying is accurate. The frequency with which petrochemical products are used in all kinds of products, that it affects everything. I know that that's true, but some additional examples and some proof of that would be a good thing to have there. Like I said, I think most people understand that that's true, but there's not really much quantification of it. The closest that you come to quantifying any of it is the transportation cost, which I think is a good element of it, but it's not the only element of it, and that's actually going to make your argument stronger if you can show that it's a bigger proportion of the cost of producing those products, that the oil is an important component in that process. That would strengthen your argument. So I think that's information that you'd want to be able to add to the argument. And I like the fact that you had a reasonable summary, and basically when you finished you came back to the point that you were talking about, and that makes it easier for everybody to kind of digest the argument that you're making. Thank you.